Hey everybody, welcome to Wampa Radio. I'm DoA. With me is Charmer, and guess what? Once again, very sadly, we are sans Flake. We miss you, Flake, but he couldn't make it this week. So we are, in charge, which is a dangerous prospect, especially because I'm the one running the recording. So any technical issues, you can blame me. Any janky, weird stuff, blame me. Flake's gonna try to save it with his editing, but good luck, buddy.
Maybe, and I might be the one who ends up editing it.
Oh,
and then
okay.
It's going to be even worse. Who knows? But one way or the other, the point of this is that this is our fault. All right.
Yeah.
Flake is very clearly the best of us, and it's going to show. So with that in mind, I guess this is normally where somebody would mention what the show's supposed to be about. I will do that.
Go for it.
Our main topic is going to be discussing kind of two things, but they're parts of the same coin, which is trying to solve a meta when you don't know all the pieces. We've kind of crossed the threshold. We know about half of the set one, and there's a lot of deck building and theory crafting going. It's my favorite time of any card game, but it's hard to account for those things when you don't have all of the pieces. But also there's the kind of evergreen theory crafting, which is when you're testing, do you want to just test with a small group of people, and what are the dangers of that, and what does that do to your innovation, et cetera. So basically we're going to kind of talk through what it's like to solve for the unknown in this episode.
Yep, that's right. It's going to be fun, and we're going to, of course, look at the new cards that have been revealed for the Star Wars Unlimited card game. That's a card game we're talking about, in case you're curious. You probably know that if you're watching. But first, Charmer, we have to do the cave poll of the week. See if he leaves it in. Yeah. So here we are with the cave poll of the week, and this was another question that I came up with, and I want to acknowledge the fact that I intentionally did not include Chopper in the choices, because as we all know, he's the most bloodthirsty droid that has ever been created.
He would have been the clear winner by landslide because he is a literal war criminal.
So the point is that when you do something like this, which our question was, which of these droids wins in a fatal 4-way death match? It was BB-8, K2SO, C3PO, and R2D2, and obviously we can't include Chopper. He's just too strong. That'd be like,
Right.
Who's gonna win in a death match between like Yamcha, Krillin, Tien, and Super Saiyan 3 Goku? It's like, you gotta take Goku out of it.
Yeah.
Make it a little bit tighter, right? So anyway.
Yeah, it's like who's gonna win in a fight between Flake, DoA, Charmer, and Mike Tyson?
Depends on the fight. If it's StarCraft, he's going down. If it's physical
like
altercation, I'm in big trouble.
He's probably like a secret Zerg pro.
Yeah, I
Just
could see
kidding.
him. I could see him 9 pooling. Yeah.
Yeah.
They keep changing the number of, I guess you get more Zerglings now, because it was 6 pool. And
Yeah,
then
what's
they
6
increase.
pool? When you said
Well,
9 pool, I was like 9.
I
That
mean,
seems low.
It was 4 pool originally in like StarCraft Brood War, and then it was 6 pool in StarCraft 2, the initial iteration. Then they increased the amount of workers you get in like Legacy of the Void. I think it was. I think it's 9 pool now, maybe 8 pool. I don't know. I watch StarCraft still fairly frequently, but I haven't played in a while. I admit it's very sad, but. Wow, embarrassing confessions today. But let's talk about our cave poll though instead. Who did you choose for the
All
droid
right.
here?
First of all, I want to apologize, but I snap selected K2SO.
Oh, okay.
Because I felt like he was just the clear favorite. Not only because of his size and his stature, but also because he just has that kind of cold, calculating aggression. He's not going to mess around. I feel like some of the others might try to be a little bit funny or flashy or whatever. But then so I'd already selected, but after I had time to marinate on it, I actually think that I should have selected C3PO. And then when I saw the results, I was like, man, I kind of wish I did, because he was not
C3PO.
respected at all. Yeah, because, and this is referencing that thing that I sent you and Flake in the message, which is C3PO is technically Luke's brother, right? He is a son of Skywalker, so he's secretly really powerful. He's just never had a chance to put it on display. And I think that this would be the time where he would, you know, do the big surprise, right? Like in wrestling, you got to have the big surprise.
Yeah, that's true. You have to have the surprise appearance, you know. Oh, C-3PO from the top rope. Nobody expected him. And did you notice he has a red arm?
Yeah. Wow. C-3PO would be the one who everyone thinks it was eliminated, but he didn't go over the top rope, and then he comes in at the end and gets the final elimination.
I could see that. Yeah, I mean, he's like he's a Royal Rumble champion. But so you would have picked C-3PO, and I think that's your assumption is similar to my assumption for what I picked. I ended up picking R2-D2, and the reason is similar in that we don't know what he's fully capable of. And you know, I had to go with R2 over C-3PO because R2-D2 has shown time and time again that, like, if there's a situation, he has a gadget for that situation ready to go. So I feel like if it came down to it, if it was a life or dismantlement situation, he would have some sort of gadget, you know, or at the very, you know, at the end, he would just open up his chest and there'd be like a thermal detonator in there, like IG-11 and Mandalorian. You just blow everybody up. You know, I feel like he wouldn't go down without taking everyone with him at the very least.
He is a MacGyver droid.
Yeah.
I think that's what you've just sold me on. He always does have, if it's not the right gadget, he just has the right way to cause chaos. Like that, where Chopper just causes death, R2-D2 causes chaos. But I think you're right. I think R2-D2 is another great choice.
He's like a Swiss Army knife, but the Swiss don't exist in Star Wars. So it'd have to be like a Bothan Army knife. Because they're pretty tricky, right? They're spies and things.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, there you go. So let's take a look at what the results were, though. What did you, the viewers at home, choose? And there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So
K2SO.
Yeah, K2SO wins it with 55.6%, and that is understandable. He's a reprogrammed Imperial droid, right? Very strong, very agile, in a straight up fisticuffs. I think K2SO could certainly take on nearly any droid. That said, again, we know that other droids have lots of tricks. I think BB-8 probably has some too, although you can't fit as much efficiently in a sphere, I suppose. R2-D2, you can fit a lot in like a trash can shape.
Yeah,
R2-D2 was second.
He routinely, I mean, he hacks things and he zaps things, and we figured out he has like rocket thrusters. He went through the first 3 movies and didn't even know that he can just like blast off. And I guess it makes sense. He is an astromech, right? So like if you became detached from your ship, you would have to have a way to use some thrusters to get back. But I'm just saying, like, he's full of surprises.
Well, it just makes you wonder, why did he take a nosedive off the X-Wing on Dagobah when he could have just like serenely floated over to the bank of the little lake thing? Why did he do that?
Maybe the journey to Dagobah expended a bunch of his power because the navigation, it's supposed to be like a hard to get to place.
Sure.
And he didn't have enough charge. I don't know.
I think that sounds like the in canon reason is that like, he was low charge and he didn't know, he was kind of like dizzy, and he just sort of fell off. And we need to push the plot along. But yeah, he did win second place. So 38.1. Yeah. BB-8 did get a few votes. C-3PO got no votes at all, which I'm kind of sad about. I figured he would have gotten at least one. When I saw none,
I'm like, man, I really wish I would have went with my gut and just went with the underdog.
Because C-3PO is the most, I would say the most able to, like if he needed to like convince somebody else to do the dirty deeds for him, he probably could. He's the most versed in communication.
Yeah.
So I feel like he could make some deals.
He would be the best wrestling manager.
That's right.
Of them, right? Like he would be the best Paul Heyman or Paul Bearer. I kind of want to see C-3PO as Paul Bearer now with K2SO being the Undertaker.
Drags in the coffin and it opens up and there's K2SO inside it. Yeah.
Yeah, I want that now.
I can see that. Hey, Photoshop it. We got some good stuff with our Photoshop requests last time. We're gonna wait until Flake's around again to review those, but look forward to that. That's gonna be fun. So anyway, there's our cave poll of the week. We'll have another one as Flake says, every Sunday-ish for you to vote on at the Wampa Radio Twitter account, X Twitter account.
See, this is why I don't like the name X, because it makes it sound like somebody that you used to be in a relationship with, right?
Well, it is kind of how Twitter is for all of us.
Yeah, and no, it's Twitter.
Yeah. Well, much like some exes, I feel many people do have an abusive relationship with that platform. So, maybe there is a correlation there. Who knows? But anyway, go on that platform, whatever you want to call it, and look for the cave poll every Sunday-ish to see what the questions are. Even though the holidays are coming up, you've got time. You've got time to go look and vote in the cave poll, don't you? Of course you do. But anyway, that's it. That's it for the cave poll. Let's move on. Yeah. Do you want to just jump right into spoilers?
Yeah, I think that is the appropriate thing to do. We did get 3 new cards revealed.
We did.
And they are rather interesting. I'm just going to jump right in here. I'm a big fan of this first one.
All right.
Which is the Inferno 4. So this is a 2-cost space unit. It is Vigilance and Villainy. Has a 2/3 stat line. Has the tags Imperial, Vehicle, and Fighter. But when played or when defeated, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put any number of them on the bottom of your deck, and the rest on top in any order. Mm-hmm. Now, I really like this because, one, the stat line is actually really solid. A 2/3 for 2 in space is decent if you're just trying to get some early game presence. And if you're playing something like Vigilance, Villainy, it might be in more of a control style deck, especially with the effect. So a good sized body with a relevant effect to help set up your future turns, I think is really cool. But the other reason that I'm a big fan of this as well is that it serves as both a potential like counterplay for like Thrawn decks, for example, where if they've looked at the top card of your deck and then you open your turn with Inferno, now it becomes unknown information for them. But also in the future, it's a card game, right? We might have effects where things interact with the top card of your deck in other ways, and so this could end up becoming a combo piece. This is one of those cards that right now I describe as like good, not great. It fills a good role, right? It's early body in space, helps smooth out your draws, helps just slow things down if you're on the control game plan, but in the future could have a much bigger impact because of the ability being so dynamic.
I'm looking through some of the other the cards here just to see how this would sort of fit in. I feel like this is going to be a card that's in a lot of Vigilance decks early on. I mean, there's just no downside to this. It's like you mentioned already, it's a great stat line for your first turn play. You get to essentially scry 4 over the course of it. And in a game where you draw 2 cards every turn, being able to do that is so huge, right? You can have such a influence over, what you're going to draw that next turn. And if it lives a couple turns, you get to do that 2 turns, right? So yeah, I think it's just a great card. I think it's going to be in every Vigilance deck, essentially. It's just going to be one of those early game standards. And not much more to say besides that. I mean, it's a little bit limited in that it's Vigilance and Villainy. So congratulations, Darkseid. You get Inferno 4. But it's a great card. What can you say? You want to move on to the next one?
I do.
All right, I'm gonna pop this one up here. It is the Jawa Scavenger, and we should say both of these were revealed by Garbage Rollers, in case you're curious.
Yes.
So thank you, Garbage Rollers, for bringing us these wonderful cards. Jawa Scavenger is a cunning ground unit, 1-cost, 2/1 stat line Fringe Jawa with Saboteurs. So a pretty basic card. 1 for a 2/1. It's nice. 1 is obviously as fragile as units go. Saboteur is great. 2 power isn't gonna really eliminate a lot of stuff early on. So I do sort of wonder about the usefulness of this. We always talk about limited, right? And in limited, obviously decks that people build are going to be less tight. So then perhaps the unit's biggest benefit, which is Saboteur, is in that case not even going to be super useful because you aren't guaranteed to really get much use out of it. So as far as an early game play goes, if you're really fishing for things and if you need something to play on turn 1, this is something to play on turn 1. Aside from that, unless there's some cool like Jawa tribal element that we have yet to see or something, then I think this card is a common, and it looks and will behave like a common card. What do you think? I'm not super high on this one. I think it's fine, but I'm not excited about it.
I agree with everything that you've said, and you highlighted what I think are the most important pieces of the card, which are the Jawa and Fringe tags, because if this ever becomes useful, it will likely be because of those two pieces of info. It is, as you said, it's a common, but even more so, it's a single aspect common. So many of the cards, as a way to balance them, the more powerful they are, the more aspect symbols they have to kind of balance that out. This is a single aspect, one drop common, so you don't expect a lot from it. The 1 health is a bit of a detriment because there are a number of ways to ping cards already, even in set 1. So when I say ping, that's like a card game terminology for deal 1 damage to something. So if you're new to card games or Star Wars is going to be your first, that's what I mean when I say ping. But this is not something that will survive very often. It will find the value when you play it on turn 1, and otherwise you will likely end up resourcing this a lot of the time. Or, as you were saying, in limited, there might be situations where if you draw it late in the game, but you can kind of go wide with it, being able to again potentially go through a sentinel or something, you might find some value. The problem is that when you develop it late, because it's so small, your opponent will then also have an opportunity to attack into it or target it long before you ever get that attack. So in that regard, where the other side of the value potentially comes from is by forcing an answer from your opponent. Because one of the things that we haven't, I think, highlighted enough yet is what I would describe as the action economy, the nature of the back and forth with the actions. So this is the kind of card where if your opponent ends their turn early taking the initiative because they want to do something, and then you end your turn with like, okay, well, I dropped 2 Jawa scavengers or something like that, that is potentially a lot of pressure now, and it might change what they were taking the initiative to do, right? It might alter their game plan, which is why I like that it's in cunning, because that would be the cunning use of it, is instead using this as a, like, I'm trying to disrupt what you wanted to do, even though the card itself is kind of generic and not really that great. It does still represent a threat.
Yeah, and I mean, you could, if it lives, you could upgrade it. You know, you could make this a stronger unit, which in that case, Saboteur would be more impactful. But as it is, in a vacuum,
in a vacuum,
it's fine. I will not. It's definitely not bad. It's fine. It's a Jawa. What do you expect? It's a Jawa. We're not expecting a lot from Jawas.
I hope we get a Jawa tribal. Sure. And I actually kind of like the art, just because
I like the art too, actually.
It's got a good perspective. You still get the Sandcrawler in the background, right? You get that iconic, but also I just like that even though this is Jawa Scavenger, they have the Jawas in the background as well, right? Because that's their thing. There's a bunch of them.
There's always a bunch of them, and he's a Jawa Scavenger that's ready to fight, right? Which is important if he's going to be, attacking people in your deck, right? Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I'm not a huge Jawa fan. I'm not anti-Jawa. I've just never been I've never been a Jawa lover like many people out there in the Star Wars world are. They are adorable. Their ways are mischievous, which appeals to people, but not me.
So I like them. To me, they are my Ewoks. I know a lot of people that love Ewoks, and I'm usually very anti-Ewok for whatever reason, but I also love Jawas, and I understand that basically makes me a hypocrite. But to me, I don't know. I saw the Jawas first. I fell in love with the Jawas first, and I just think that they're adorable little misfits.
Yeah, they are adorable. I mean, Star Wars has always had like adorable things. Like, I guess my question is, in the pantheon of semi-adorable Star Wars things that appear in each film, New Hope has Jawas, Return of the Jedi has Ewoks, Empire Strikes Back. Would you say Ugnaughts fill that category? Much less adorable, I think, but also in the same vein of a small multitude of aliens,
right,
making noise, doing a function.
Comedic relief.
Kind of.
Maybe what they were supposed to do.
What else would there be in Empire if we assume that there needs to be this sort of like aspect to each movie? It's got to be the Ugnaughts, right?
Yeah. Or, you could say that it's the Ugnaughts because of the multitude, but if you're trying to go for like, the adorable character that's of small stature, like, isn't that Yoda?
Yeah, but I don't really think of him as adorable, you know?
He's kind of adorable. He's a
first, like, he's kind of crazy, and then he becomes like very wise and someone you want to like respect, you know?
He's the Willy Wonka of Star Wars.
Would you go up to Yoda and be like, "You're adorable"?
Yeah, I think I would.
Wow. You're a brave man. I don't know if I would have the guts to do that. He's nice.
Yeah, what's he gonna do? Yeah. Like he's not. He'll like bonk me on the head with his cane or something, and I can deal with that. I deserve it if I'm calling him adorable, but.
Well, what do you, the viewers at home? Leave a comment on the video. Is Yoda who's more adorable, Yoda or Ugnaughts? Who is the adorable character in Empire Strikes Back? You know.
And before you vote, I want to throw this out there: which of those characters has been in a backpack canonically? Because normally you
C-3PO.
Carry adorable things in backpacks or chest packs. Or
does C-3PO's torso count for this?
C-3PO's adorable.
So when C-3PO is blown apart into a bunch of pieces and it's just his torso with a backwards head and Chewbacca's backward, that might be the most adorable thing in Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, you know? I would vote for that, sure.
In terms of things in backpacks. Yeah. And we're getting very specific here. Let's move on to the third card. The third card is the Vanguard Ace. Do you want go ahead?
Sure. This is a space unit, cunning and heroism. Small stat line. It's a 1/1, but it has the tags New Republic vehicle fighter. Now that is very interesting to me because of the text. The text says, when played, for each other card you played this phase, give an experience token to this unit. Now, the reason that I mention it's surprising with those tags is because this is New Republic, not Rebel. And this feels like the kind of card I would want to run in a Rebel Swarm deck, where you're playing a bunch of small units and then you get a chunky space unit for value.
Yeah.
And that tells me that, again, this is one of those cards you might earmark for the future. If it doesn't find play in set 1, you might earmark it for the future if we get more New Republic stuff. But this is... I think it's decent. There are some caveats here. One, even though it costs 2, you don't want to play it early. And it is also 2 aspect. So you're really going to throw this in the sort of deck that you're trying to do a build around. Now, the places where I think it could get value, though, because this is heroism and cunning, we already know that there are some cunning archetypes where you care more about the events that you're playing. And this says card played, not unit played. So in a quote unquote spell heavy or an event heavy cunning deck, this might be a decent unit that you're playing late game, where you play 2 or 3 cheap events and then you slap this down for some value to establish board space. The downside, though, is anything that gets rid of upgrades, because we know experience tokens are upgrades, then that could be a great way to target this. Obviously, it loses a lot of its value if you're playing against cunning and they use something like Waylay to bounce it back to your hand. This is an interesting card. It's kind of like high risk, high reward, but you also have to build around it. But you can also see the potential payoff in it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a situation where you want to play at least 2 cards before you play it. So you're at least getting like good stats per cost, right? You have a 3/3 for 2 then at that point. Only playing 1 card, just getting a 2/2 for 2 is pretty mid, as the kids say these days. So I wouldn't want to do that. So I think it'll be difficult to implement. I'm very surprised by the New Republic tag as well, since the art would indicate a Rebel X-Wing with an Imperial Star Destroyer behind it in what seems to me to clearly be the Galactic Civil War era. So I have a little bit of an issue with the art combined with the card. But it is cool that we see the New Republic tag there, because, like you said, that opens up more options in the future if we have, other cards and leaders and things like that deal with the New Republic versus Rebels. So, yeah, I feel like it's a little bit surprising to see it in the first set, but I agree that it seems like it's maybe a nod to something in the future, but we will see. Inevitably, they have to tackle the sequels, right? So, well, wait, they have Kylo in the art for aggression and stuff. So, yeah. We're definitely doing it at some point.
They have given nods to the other eras already, and I do like that they are doing that, because it, one, shows the forethought of the game, but also it's just kind of reminding you that, hey, we're going to go there eventually. So even though the core focus, right, Spark of Rebellion is on that era, there is very clear homages and just characters, right? Like we've already seen Mace Windu, for example, crashing the party and showing up in a set based on an era that he's not a part of, unless you believe my fan theory, which is that he wasn't dead, because Yoda does.
You don't see Yoda, the body. He's not dead.
Yeah, you don't see the body. Yeah. When Yoda disappears, they say if you don't see the body, he's still alive. So maybe I'll get my wish someday. But yeah, I was just going to use this as a transition. I think that this is a great card to transition because it does, in my opinion, nod to either stuff in the future or at a bare minimum, stuff we haven't seen yet. And that I think leads very well into our topic, which is how do you evaluate cards and even further build the decks when you don't have all of the pieces, right? So that's like part one of our discussion, because we are hitting the point now where a lot of people are, playing games with Tabletop Simulator and things like that and building decks. And it's difficult because on the one hand, if you're a card game veteran, I think it's pretty easy to spot the stuff that you expect to be good versus not good. Yeah. I don't think that it's wrong to say, hey, this deck will be good, or this card will be good, or this will be an archetype. But I think it's also one of those things where it can be difficult to know with certainty when you only have part of the puzzle, right? Because we've just kind of crossed the threshold of the halfway point of set one, which means that as much as we know about the game now, we could theoretically know enough to turn it on its head, right? Literally see the other side of a coin.
Well, before we go any further, too, shout out to Board Game Theory, who revealed that last card as well. Congrats. It's a very interesting card. Yeah. But going back to your topic, and our topic, not just your topic, our topic, we've got, according to SWODB, which has done a great job of archiving all the cards that have been revealed so far, 178 cards have been revealed so far. And that is over half now. So we're getting to the point where, we do probably have a little bit better of an indication of where the set is heading. But like you said, we do still have to be careful too, because it's one thing to build decks with the cards that are available and play those games and be like, okay, I'm kind of getting a feel for how this leader plays or how these cards can combo together. And I think that's good and that's fine. And there's some great content coming out with that. I think the danger that we're talking about is when you start making big assumptions about the set and be like, this is the way it's going to be because of this, where it's like, well, you haven't seen everything yet. There's still quite a bit to be revealed yet. So it's hard to make any, hard determinations at this point. But I do feel like we are getting to the point where you can start to kind of get the vibe of the way some things are going to go.
Yeah, I think that you can get a vibe. Part of the reason that I wanted to talk about this, and I'll be transparent, this was my suggestion, is because when I covered Legends of Runeterra, there was a time period, and they've kind of amplified it even more so now, but there was a time period where every time a new set was coming out, they would slowly drip reveals the same way that Star Wars Unlimited is doing. And then you would get to a point where up until the day before an expansion would go live, you would know, I'd say like 80 to 85% of the set through the drip releases and reveals, etc. But there was always like a small handful of cards that you wouldn't know until literally the day before, because then they would invite content creators to kind of play the patch early, because that's a digital card game. And on two separate occasions through the reveals, there were instances where people thought like, this is for sure going to end up being like the deck of this expansion because of what had been revealed. And then there was like something, one random card sometimes that was not in the revealed things, but it was so like not just powerful, but like pivotal and important to the way the meta played out, that it blew things wide open. And I think that's one of the reasons why they didn't reveal it ahead of time, because they still also want that kind of surprise factor. And when I think about my experience with Legends of Runeterra, and I also think about what I think is a good thing, but when I think about how purposeful Fantasy Flight has been with their reveal structure, reveal season, I feel like, and I don't know this for certain, I don't have inside info, but I feel like based on my previous experiences with other games, there's some real spice that we haven't seen yet. And that is the only reason that I wanted to talk about it, right? Because I do think that there is benefit, obviously, to playing the game so that you learn it. And I think that getting a jump on testing is good, but I also feel like it's a difficult thing to go in with certainty. And so part two of why I wanted to talk about this, and I want to give a special shout out to them as well. The Space Arena, Ground Arena folks, the Saga folks, right? They posted a video, I believe, yesterday, today, might have been today even, that was about Sabine and some of the testing they've done and her being very powerful early on. And I do think Sabine's going to be a very, very good deck. But what I really liked about their approach was they were saying, okay, if Sabine is potentially going to be good, then how do you deck build knowing that? And I think that that's one of the better approaches to take, is instead of saying like, this is going to be the best deck and this is the way you should play it, instead it's more theoretical, right? Like, if you have any sort of meta where a deck is prevalent, then how does that impact the way you build your deck, right? I think that those are some of the better questions to ask. Similarly, and this is one of the reasons I always like phrase it the way I do, when you see certain cards, even if they don't look good, I think that there are certain things you want to earmark for later. So again, that Vanguard Ace card right now, I don't think it's necessarily an all-star, but if we get a bunch of New Republic stuff, we get a bunch of cheap cunning spells, things like that, events, then it could be something to revisit. And I wanted to get what your thought process is on doing things, in that kind of like theoretical realm, and like what your process would be if you were approaching it.
First of all, I think it's fun. And I think that's one of the fun things about expecting an expansion or a new card game, is getting to do that theory crafting. I think, especially from the competitive player standpoint, there's kind of a couple sides to it. The biggest thing is to know the potential dangers of doing that. One of the ones as a player is that you don't want to ingrain wrong information into your head through your playtesting that will then cause you to make wrong decisions in the important matches you will play down the road. I think that's part of it. If you do too much with a smaller pool of cards, then you run the risk of ingraining bad habits and things. So you have to be careful about that. I think outside of the competitive aspect of doing early testing and talking about it and things like that, is that I feel like people like us, content creators, if we truly do like this game and like where it's going, have a responsibility to represent the game in the most accurate way possible. And so when we talk about things like, things being strong in the game, what we expect, we always have to make sure we're adding the caveat that we haven't seen everything yet. These are our assumptions based on what has been revealed thus far, and not, us saying this is the way it's going to be. Because again, you might be wrong, and you don't want to give players the wrong impression, especially new players that are learning about the game from your content, So I think especially with a new game that's coming out for the first time, and it's an intellectual property like Star Wars, so it's probably going to bring in new card game players. There is a certain level of responsibility to content creators to make sure that if we truly do like this game and we truly do want to promote it, that we're doing it in a healthy way for possible new players. That's my TED talk on it anyway. But yeah, it's fun, and that's one of the best parts about it, but you have to do it responsibly,
So this is where I play the Sith advocate, and I say,
okay,
I thought we were supposed to say that every new card is broken and every deck is unbeatable, and you have to use all of these clickbait titles
I'm
about
so bad
this is
at that.
Too strong, this needs nerfs now. I'm also so bad at it because I'm just not built for hyperbole like that.
Yeah.
I only like to do it in comedic sense. So I will absolutely say things that are outlandish, but it's always intended to be a joke. And I think part of the problem is that my delivery is still the same as it always is. And I think sometimes people take me seriously. There's even been times where I've seen comments on our YouTube videos for this, where like I've said something and I'm like, oh, that's my fault. The joke just didn't land. And I know it's a me problem because I am just expressionless and dead inside, but I usually only try to get off the deep end for things when it's meant for comedic effect. Whenever I'm providing like a real analysis, I try to be
you're saying you're from the Midwest. I understand. Yeah, that's what you're telling me is you're from the upper Midwest, and
that's exactly
that's how we all are here, basically. Very dry senses of humor. Yeah,
Saharan.
Exactly. Yeah, which is weird because we have so much snow. But anyway, I digress. You're right. It's the type of thing where you do need to kind of be careful of your delivery and all that kind of stuff. But I'm terrible at the clickbaity stuff too. I've tried in the past. I've tried to make the YouTube thumbnails where I'm like, or something, and I'm like, I just can't do it. I don't know. I know it gets me less views. I know over the years my social media has not grown as much as it could be, but I just can't. I can't do it. I tried and I can't do it. And you know what? That's just me. And I have to be proud of that. You have to be proud of you as well, Charmer.
I guess what I've also learned about myself, as you talk about the clickbait stuff, is that I realize that I'm just boring. Because when I first started making content, hear me out. When I first started making content,
convince me.
I was like, I will make the kind of content that I would want to watch, right? I think that's the natural starting place for everybody. And then I realized that the kind of stuff I watch are just like how-to videos, and I don't care about the thumbnail. The thumbnail just needs to say in big block letters, like, what you're teaching me, and that's it.
So you're saying we're both over 30 is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
I don't need like funny faces or hyperbole or whatever. And so I also am just awful at it. And I've received that feedback on several occasions, by the way, from people like, hey man, you got to step up your thumbnail game. And I'm like, what? Like, does that mean I need a manicure?
Charmer is boomer exposed.
I'm so boomer, man.
It's all right. That term isn't even used correctly because boomers are actually more like our parents or grandparents' generations to a certain extent. We are like proto-Zoomers, not Zoomers. We are like the earliest internet generation.
Well, I think technically we are elder millennials.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, like tail end of what generate? I haven't looked at the actual dates, but it's like, when does Generation X end? It's like the early 80s.
I always see fluctuating stuff depending on the printing. I'm either the like last year of Gen X, or I'm like the first year or two of millennial. But yeah, it's usually like early 80s. I see it. Some people say Gen X is like 82 is the last year, and I've seen it go as far as like 84. So
I feel more millennial, even though I was really into grunge rock music in the 90s. I feel more because I remember the millennium, right? Yeah. I actually on New Year's. Okay, so here's a DoA. We need a new category, Flake, called DoA is old. But so I remember in 1999, December 31st, 11:59 p.m. I went over to my dad's computer and I wanted to watch the date turn over because I didn't think anything would happen. But in case it did, in case all the computers did explode and the world ended and all that, I wanted a front row seat. So I was like, I don't think anything's going to happen. But just in case, I want to see it if it does. Nothing happened. It just went to midnight.
Yeah.
The date just changed.
I was also in front of a computer.
Oh, really?
As well. Yeah. I was 100% the same thing. I was like, well, if something happens, then I want to have that experience. I don't want to be the guy who was like out and I didn't know, or I didn't see it. Yeah, well, it's
I mean, I was in high school. Were you in high school as well?
I was.
So we were both in high school. So, and I feel like I was old enough to understand that all the Y2K stuff was like total BS. Like I was like, there's no way. Like it's just a date change. Like even if there is a bug, it's not going to be this catastrophic thing. It was clearly, even to like my teenage mind, it was something that had been obviously like blown way out of proportion. Just like the popularity of Beanie Babies, which is another 90s thing in case you're curious.
And Pogs.
Oh yeah. Oh yes, the Pogs. But Pog Champion, in fact. But so we knew nothing was going to happen. But just in case, we had to watch. So anyway, I don't know why we're talking about 1999 right now.
Because we're old. And we don't have emergency packs to open yet.
I guess not. This is why we need Flake.
I love that you were like, it needs to be a segment called DoA is old. Like I'm not just right there next to you.
I'm used to being the oldest person in the room when it comes to esports and stuff.
You think you are a hair older than me, but I'm also used to being the oldest person in the room. Wow. There's just not many folks like us still in this space.
We'll have an old fight when we meet up in person at some point to determine who is the oldest. But what were we talking about again? Do you remember?
Yeah, we were talking about the fun of theory crafting.
Oh yeah. The fun of theory crafting.
And just some of the things that go into testing. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk about as well is when you are testing, and I think this is the evergreen piece of the topic, right? Whether you are doing this now ahead of the game, or, this could be 2 years down the road. When you are play testing to determine if something is good, I think that it's very important to have people that you trust, people that are interested in getting better at the game and understand the game. But you also need to expand periodically outside of that inner circle, because otherwise what happens is you get what I call incestuous feedback, meaning if everybody eventually comes to a consensus that this is the best thing, then you just stop kind of trying, or you attack it from that as being certainty. And right now is a great example, right? There are people who are very excited about the game, but I would wager the people that are playing the game regularly, whether that's Tabletop Simulator or whatever, is less than 100 people. Game launches, we're going to have thousands of people playing the game, right? So the scale is going to be wildly different, and that means the thought processes, the decks, the archetypes or whatever will likely change. And it's hard to account for that sort of thing. And you see it even in other card games, right? It's not uncommon in Magic or in Flesh and Blood or some of these other games where you have these testing groups and they all come to an event with the exact same deck list, because in their eyes, they arrived at what the best thing is. And sometimes they do very well and they dominate an event, but there are also a lot of cases where their decision-making didn't account for, a certain archetype to show up, or didn't account for something, and then the entire team does horrible. So I think that it's important to highlight as well that when you do start playing the game, it's kind of important to just check with people outside of your circle.
Sure. It's also important to just play as many different decks as you can, right? And continue to try to iterate. If you think something is the strongest, right? Like using Sabine as an example again, if you think she's the strongest, right up until the day of that tournament, you keep trying new things to see if, to see what works. Because at the very least, you'll have all this experience against the leader, and that'll put you in a better position for it, So your win rate might, go up a percentage point or two, just from sheer volume of experience, and you can't get that if you just decide, well, that leader's too strong to worry about. We're just going to do other things, but yeah.
Well, and you also kind of have to play the numbers game as well, which is, if you do think a deck is going to be very strong, how many people do you expect to play it? How many people do you expect to bring it? And what I mean by that is sometimes if you have a deck that's very good into the quote unquote meta deck or the best deck, and it's bad against everything else, it can still be the right call to bring your deck in and do well. Back when I was playing Magic more competitively, this is probably showing my age, I was playing when the very first mirrored in block was in standard. So Arcbound Ravager.
I remember those days.
So I was playing Cloudpost Tooth and Nail even when Ravager and Skullclamp were still legal, because I had tailored the deck to a point where I could never lose to Affinity, but I would lose to everything else. And it was still the right call because Affinity was 60% of the field.
Yeah. Well, that's you can always counterpick kind of thing, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, obviously there's going to be some sort of slow, grindy control deck that people are going to try to bring to counteract all the Sabines, if that's what ends up being the case, So there's ways to get around it. I'm curious to see what's going to happen with that. But again, we got to wait until more cards are revealed, I think. I mean, yeah, she seems very strong right now. And again, the person, I watched that video as well, and I think the best comment that he made was that the deck flows very nicely, which is, when you look at the curve of the list they showed and you look at the way it's played, you're yeah, that does flow extremely well. And so that's where you're all right, well, even if other stuff comes out, this is already it seems like a good core for what this leader can do. And so that's where it's okay, I think we can kind of make that assumption that this is going to be, you know, a stronger leader, right? But again, you know, there might be a card or two that comes up that totally blows it out of the water. Who knows? But she is just a common leader, so we'll see.
I know what you're talking about, right? I think that the takeaway there is that this is, like I said, I still think Sabine's going to be a very strong leader. She just has, not just with her, but like with her card pool, she has all the tools that you want in an aggressive deck. And I'm also biased because Sabine's one of my favorite characters, and so I'm dying to play it as well. But the flow thing also stood out to me, but for a different reason. And again, it's kind of more to that discussion topic, which is it almost feels like the core parts of Sabine, there might be one or two more cards you might slot in, but I feel like the core parts of the Sabine archetype have all been revealed. And then when I try out some of the other archetypes, I feel like there are cogs for that machine that are still missing or unrevealed, right? So the ramp archetype, for example, there's like a dearth of what I would consider to be the good mid-game options that let you make it to the late game. Like all your early game plays have pretty much been revealed or what you expect to be.
Yeah.
There's enough late game bombs that you can tinker with them. It's that mid-game where I'm like, okay, what is this deck supposed to do here? And it doesn't flow very well right now. And I think it's just because we haven't seen everything.
Yeah,
and there's a few decks that are like that.
I want to see what's going to get me those Star Destroyers. I mean, we got a little bit of ramp, I suppose, in command, but I want to see what's going to help me survive to get to that point, you know, for my ramp to work. But we'll see. Yeah,
traditionally with the ramp stuff, like when I think back to the Elder Scrolls Legends, you've got your early game plays that are low powered, but they ramp you into usually what was like a decent mid-game defensive tool that let you survive to drop the bombs, right? So in the Elder Scrolls Legends, you know, there was a 3-drop that was just like a 1/1. It had guard in that game, that Sentinel, but it ramped you, and then that allowed you to play another 5-drop that had guard to buy you time to play the late game stuff, right? Right now, we don't have that good defensive tool where it's like, okay, I sacrifice early tempo to play the ramp, and then this is what stabilizes me or buys me the time to drop the bomb.
Yeah.
So the flow, right? Again, what you were talking about, I think that's the best way to describe it. The flow isn't there yet with that deck.
I think generally when you look at the game, you're like the basic components of your gameplay plan should be, what is my turn one play going to, what is my ideal turn one going to be with my 2 resources? And then how do I get safely from there to my hero flip turn? And then how do I make that hero flip turn a big impactful turn, you know? And like, that's kind of how I look at it as far as like how I would, you know, build a deck, I guess, is like, how can I make that journey as safely and safely for me as possible and as dangerous for my opponent as possible, you know? So some of the leaders, some of the archetypes that we're seeing emerge, feels like there's gaps within that process. So yeah, we'll see what we get. But I think in conclusion for this conversation, generally the thing to keep in mind is that you're representing the game accurately. I think in my mind, that's the most important thing. What do you think?
No, I think that you have to go as outlandish as possible to get those clicks, man. You got to wake up.
You're getting better already at this.
Grind. You got to rise and grind, and you got to play the game. You got to play the content meta. Come on, bro.
Is it big, bold text, or is it big, flashy faces this week on YouTube thumbnails? How do we manipulate the algorithm to our favor? That's the question.
It is a big, bold text that you craft out of contorting your face to match the letters.
I'll work on that. I'm sure there's an app for that, right? I don't know.
Yeah, there's got to be. Or for every O, it's just
or
like
a TikTok
you going
filter. Yeah. Oh, there you go. Now we know what Flake needs to do with the thumbnail for this one. I'm just saying. You're not getting off that easy. I'm just saying. But yeah, I think that was a fun discussion to have. I think it's important to think about as we start to kind of like come out of where there's not a lot of stuff revealed yet to where most of the stuff is revealed as we lead up to this game, you know. And again, like, the reason you're watching this podcast, the reason we're making this podcast, the reason we're doing all this is because we're excited about this game. And so we want to make sure everything we do as content creators helps other people be excited and have the right idea about the game. So let's do it, team. That's right. Moving on. Normally we would have a bad feeling mailbag this week, but neither of us grabbed a question, so we're kind of I don't think we have one, do we? I didn't have one.
I was going to say, are you sure?
Well, we don't have one in the doc, at least. No,
I
don't have access to the email.
We don't have one on the thing. So we didn't have anyone that I wanted to answer without Flake present, but we did have some non-serious ones that I felt like we could answer.
Yeah, let's do it
for giggles.
Sounds fun to me.
So we'll skip the intro and we'll just jump right to the bad feeling mailbag.
I don't know. I have a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I have a really bad feeling about this.
Oh, I have a bad feeling about this.
Yeah, you and me both.
So these are some of the ones that I'd like earmarked for if we ever wanted to do either like a bloopers episode or fun stuff. So this one was not from our most recent video, but the previous one. Delinian asks, what sociopaths play stasis at kitchen table magic? Because during the instant speed discussion, you had talked about breaking out stasis and some of those other things where like your opponent just doesn't get to play the game.
Yeah, not me. I don't do that. Yeah. Well, so this goes back to when I was in college and we would have like on-campus tournaments, and I thought we were all just a group of friends, but then this one guy would bring stasis every single time, and everybody hated him for it. It was just so unfun. And we had time limits for the matches in our tournaments, So this had happened for weeks. All right. You have to understand, this has been going on for weeks. He just keeps bringing stasis. It's finally, he plays against me one day. I'm playing red. I do. And of course, like, he never does damage to me, right? He just locks out the game basically. So I did a little bit of damage to him with my deck. And then every time it was my turn, I just sat and like timed out my timer for the turn. And I made the match take long enough that we ran out of time, and I just won by having more life. And he was so angry, but he never played stasis again after that. So
good,
mission accomplished. I don't feel good about what I have to do. It was like, where Lucian says in Lucian, the guy in Andor, you know what I'm talking about. He's I'm forced to use the tools of my enemies, So I was forced to play even slower than the stasis deck. So I don't feel good about that. It's not a proud moment for me as a card game player, but the job had to get done somehow, and I was the one to do it.
So I had a similar experience. Now, they didn't play it every time, but I had a friend that his favorite commander deck was Hidetsugu. Now, if you're not familiar, this is a legendary unit that when you tap it, all players lose half their life rounded up.
Okay.
Right? Or down or whatever. But basically, you lose half your life, and if you play any damage doubling effect, it will kill everyone at the table. So he would just play like hold the table hostage the entire time.
Uh-huh.
And I ended up finding that the way you get around it was you run fetch lands, but you leave one unactivated. So when he activates Hidetsugu, then you lose one life to go to an odd number, and then you survive and everyone else at the table dies. And the first time I did that to him, he was like stunned. And I was like, yeah.
Huh. That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah. It was fun. It was good stuff. But
that's good. I like that. All right. That was a fun one. You're right. These are fun questions. What else do you got?
So another somewhat non-serious one that I had was loading now. I hope I'm not disconnecting as we're recording this, because now this thing is stuck.
I mean, you're still coming through as far as I can see.
Good,
yeah,
good.
We can edit this out in post. Don't worry. Well, you wanted a bloopers episode.
We'll just we'll continue to do it live. It's not a big deal at all. All right, there we go. I have to go back through my previous saves.
Oh. Okay.
So this one is one that I wanted. It's not necessarily a question. Or wasn't originally phrased as a question, but have we played a single game yet?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Somebody believes that we do not play at all. Which I find
We do. I mean, the difference is that we've elected to not make gameplay content because we didn't feel enough of the cards were out again to like give an accurate sort of portrayal of the game. But of course, has this person played games? That's what I'm wondering. I'm calling you out, whoever you are. Have you played games?
It's our favorite fan.
Oh. I don't know who that is.
There was another one. This one was semi-serious, but it's also not deep, so I had earmarked it for later, which was somebody had asked whether or not we felt the initiative system was going to be the most skill testing part of the game.
Oh, I do think it is a majorly skill testing part of the game. I think the first time you're playing a game, speaking of playing games, the first time you're playing a game and you're going through your normal turn and like out of nowhere, your opponent's like, I take initiative. And you're like, for a second, you're like, well, wait, you could do all the stuff left. And then you realize they will kill you on the next turn and they just took initiative and there's nothing you do. You've just lost the game. The first time that happens, that will impress upon you very firmly that the initiative is an extremely important part of the game. So yeah, that's, I would say it will be pretty skill testing. I think it is one of the more fun elements of the game to really like analyze and digest, because you're going to make decisions where it's like, all right, I've got, a couple more points of damage I could put in the base, but this thing I really want to keep around is vulnerable. So like, do I take the initiative now? Like, is using this thing one more time worth missing out on that other stuff? So yeah, I do think that will be, I don't want to say it will be the most skill testing, but I do think it will be one of the most skill testing things.
So another one, kind of non-serious. Somebody had asked if we had a chance to check out the Star Wars Rivals Funko game yet. I know that they were demoing it at Gen Con, but I did not get to check it out.
No,
it's another Star Wars related game where you are also like using little Funko miniatures.
I haven't even heard of this. So no, I have not, because I have not heard of it before right now.
Yeah. I got to see it played, but I didn't get to play it myself. They had it demoing at Gen Con, but spoiler alert, when I was at Gen Con, I played a lot of Star Wars Unlimited instead.
Shocking. So it's Funko in that it's got things with like big heads and all that. Yeah, I mean, I have no comments on the fun aspect of the game or the strategic aspect of the game, but I've just never been a big fan of like the Funko big head kind of, look of things. So on that alone, I don't think I'd try it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, might be fun. Who knows? I can't say yes or no. Just not my personal aesthetic of choice.
All right. And so this one wasn't the direct question, but it did get me thinking. So somebody had mentioned that they had not yet seen any Rey cards yet. This was a long time ago when we were talking about, cards you were excited for. They said, well, I'm not really excited for any yet because I haven't seen a Rey Skywalker card yet. And then that made me kind of earmark the question, which is, when we eventually get to that era, and we know we are because we have seen Kylo on art, for example.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's a Star Wars card game. Of course we have to at some point. Yeah.
My question for you is, what character from the most recent set of movies are you most excited to see in the game?
So that's a tough choice. So I'm not I have opinions about the sequels. We'll put it that way. But I did like the new main characters. I liked all of them, frankly. I'm going to pick Finn because I feel like he had the most squandered potential in the sequels, where like he had a really awesome backstory, but then it didn't feel like they did very much with it in the movies, So I'll say that just because I feel like that character deserves more. So I hope he gets a second better life in the card game someday. That's what I'll go with. How about you?
Yeah, that is a tough call for me as well. I was leaning heavily toward Finn, but I'm also having a really hard time not saying Kylo because, again, I have opinions about the most recent set of films as well. But to me, one of the coolest sequences from the new films. One of the things where I was like, I saw it and I was like, okay, maybe they're doing something really cool here, is when Kylo stops the blaster bolt mid-fire, right?
Yeah.
Just because that was, in my opinion, a great way, without him doing something necessarily violent himself, it was a great way to introduce him and make him feel imposing. Like, okay, this is somebody, you know, worth fearing, or might be on the level of a Vader or whatever. And so part of me wants to see not just Kylo show up, but have something where like that's personified, whether he's like preventing damage or does something. But that was such an iconic moment when I think of like stuff I did like from the new movies, that I want to see that. Even, and I will say this, even if it's not Kylo, like I want that maybe as an event or something, but that moment where he's just stopping the bolts and like freezes time for an area is so cool.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that is a really neat scene, and it tells you right away. It's like, oh, this guy's actually really powerful with the dark side of the Force, you know, because Vader, you know, he blocked blaster bolts with his hand in Empire Strikes Back, but he never stopped them midair, you know. So it was a great intro for the character for sure. That whole sequence at the beginning of Force Awakens is pretty cool, just with his ship coming down and all that. He's introduced very effectively, I think, as a villain.
Yeah, it checked all the boxes for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think I would go with that.
Okay.
But yeah, those were some of the less serious ones.
Well, I'm glad we got through some of those then. That was good. Yeah. Nice. I feel warm and fuzzy inside. How about you?
I also feel warm and fuzzy, which is great because it's the holiday season. So if you would like a gift from us in the form of us answering a question, again, you can send us your questions either on Twitter, never X, at Wampa Radio, or again, you can email us. It's wamparadiopodcast@gmail.com, and we would be happy to attack some of your questions.
Yeah,
and I
mean
attack, by the way, like we will make fun of them. No, I'm just kidding. We will answer them accordingly.
There's that dry Charmer humor again.
Yeah, I had to qualify it afterwards because I realized when I was saying it, like, oh, they might think I'm serious.
Is he really mad at me? Well, anyway,
you would be surprised how often I get that, like, in person. In fact, I don't know if I've told this story here, but one of the times where it became very apparent to me that I'm just not aware of what I give off in person is I was at a event for the Elder Scrolls Legends where I was having dinner with a bunch of other content creators and then employees of Bethesda Games, right? And I was having a great time. And we're having dinner. It's a great Korean place. And my friend Christian, who works at Bethesda, walks over to me and he leans in real close and he goes, "Hey, man, you look like you're miserable. Are you all right?" And I was like, "No, I'm having a great time." And he was just like, "Oh, well, I just wanted to check on you." And then it was that moment where I was like, okay, maybe it's worse than I thought. Like, I've always been told it, but like I was legit having a good time and somebody came to check on me. So
it's one of the most like Midwest things I've ever heard of happening in my life, where it's like you're having a great time, people still ask if you're okay. Yeah, that's it. That's the upper Midwest in a nutshell. Yeah. Well, on that note, this is the place for random stories. You thought it was a Star Wars podcast, but as you've found out, this is where we talk about Y2K, being too serious, appearing sometimes, talk about movies, talk about a lot of things. But we do get around to talking about the card game every once in a while. So we hope you enjoyed it. Beanie Babies. Yep, that's right. Thanks for watching, everybody. That's it for this week. Have a wonderful little holiday break if you do that. Otherwise, have a great weekend. And we will see you on the next Wampa Radio.
May the Force be with you.